While the Montecito dream collapses under the weight of canceled contracts and unsellable jam, a much darker shadow is lengthening over Meghan Markle's future. Prince William, the master of the long game, is now in possession of a digital detonator that could vaporize the remains of the Sussex brand. The bullying dossier. The quest to become global billionaires is ending in a warehouse full of dead stock. The cost of naivety. Henry Mountbatten, Harry, a man with zero practical business experience, bet the farm on his wife's Suits persona. He signed off on every move, convinced she was the architect of a new empire. The absurdity of scale. Reports of 80 staff members for a simple 1+1 cooking show? The cupboards are full of flour sprinkles and wickless candles, monuments to administrative waste and a total lack of market demand. The desperate pivot. The fake royal tour to the Middle East wasn't about diplomacy. It was a high-stakes hunt for a sugar daddy backer to inject cash into the dying as-ever brand before the lights go out. Harry signed off because she convinced him this was the path to the billions. Now, he's counting the cost of an empire that has an expiry date on its products and its persona. William's fury is no longer a private matter. He holds the key to a vault that Meghan has spent millions to keep sealed. The sovereign override. Under the Iron Era protocols, Prince William, as the future monarch, has the absolute power to unblock the findings of the internal bullying investigation. The humanity audit. While the Duchess markets global compassion, William remembers the staff who required therapy after working for her. For the Iron King, this isn't just business. It's justice for the traumatized workers who were silenced to protect the institution's image. The timing. William isn't striking now. He is waiting for the exact moment Meghan attempts her final rebranding to release the findings. The diva ship demands will be exposed in 4K, turning her humanitarian shield into a legal liability. Meghan Markle may have outmaneuvered the traditionalists, but she underestimated the loyalty William inspires in his inner circle. The catalyst. Jason Knopf, the man who first sounded the alarm, still operates within William's orbit. He remains the primary witness to the atmospheric terror allegedly inflicted on the palace staff. The final deletion. Once the bullying report is unblocked, no investor in Hollywood or the Middle East will touch the Markle brand. Who wants to partner with a global icon whose internal record is defined by Employee Intelligence Summary, March 8, 2026? The whistleblower, Jason Knopf, and the documented evidence of the diva demands. The power move, William's authority to override the blocking of the inquiry. The inventory crash, the collapse of the as-ever lifestyle projects, March 2026. Behind the polished oak doors of the Sovereign's archives, a digital folder has been unlocked. It doesn't contain bank statements or property deeds. It contains something far more volatile, the human audit. These are the testimonies of the aides, the secretaries, and the young professionals who once believed they were working for a modern fairy tale, only to find themselves in what they described as an atmospheric terror. The voices of the silenced describe a regime that didn't follow the sun, but the relentless pace of a Hollywood ego. The digital barrage. Testimonies reveal a constant stream of diva demands, aggressive emails and frantic calls beginning before dawn. This wasn't hard work. According to the dossier, it was a calculated test of loyalty designed to break boundaries. The crying at desks, ledger. The report documents multiple instances of young staff members in tears, overwhelmed by a communication style that Jason Knopf, the whistleblower, famously called unacceptable behavior. The most chilling part of Chapter 49 is the stark contrast between public branding and private reality. The public persona. While the Duchess was giving global speeches on kindness and mental health advocacy, the internal records show her own staff were allegedly seeking professional therapy to cope with the stress of working under her. The silencing. For years, these voices were managed by non-disclosure agreements and the institutional need for palace peace. But the Iron Era doesn't believe in silence. Prince William has signaled that the protection of the institution will no longer extend to those who mistreated the people serving it. The voices, find their anchor in the testimony of Jason Knopf, the man who refused to look the other way. The whistleblower's revenge. Meghan Markle allegedly viewed Knopf as a catalyst for her downfall. In reality, he was the first person to document the broken people left in her wake. The sovereign override. By unblocking this inquiry, William is giving these staff members back their voices. He is transforming them from collateral damage in a PR war into the primary witnesses of a character assessment that will be permanent. Internal dossier. Documented reports of atmospheric terror within the Sussex household. The therapy logs. Evidence of staff members requiring psychological support. The power shift. William's decision to prioritize staff welfare over the Sussex shield. The bullying dossier is no longer a secret file. Under the direct authority of the sovereign, the Iron King has authorized a controlled but total release of the findings to the Parliamentary Oversight Committee. The Sussex shield has been vaporized. In the hills of Montecito and the boardrooms of Beverly Hills, the reaction is not a shout, but a frantic, coordinated delete. The social erasure. Within hours of the dossier's release, A-list contact lists are scrubbed. The leading lady, who once commanded global attention, is now a liability. Major agencies issue quiet directives. No partnerships, no appearances, no association. The as-ever liquidation. The warehouse full of jam and candles is no longer a business. It's a tax write-off. With the bullying label officially attached by a sovereign inquiry, the brand is toxic. Retailers who once flirted with the idea of a partnership now treat the Markle name like a digital contagion. At Sandringham, Henry Mountbatten watches the news cycles spin. He is no longer part of the billionaire dream. The final audit. He looks at the expired products of his life. 80 staff members for a show that never aired. A Middle Eastern tour that yielded 0 investors. He realizes that while he was watching his wife work on film sets in Toronto, she was already writing the script for his own isolation. The sovereign silence. He calls London. The call is screened. A palace aide informs him that the king is busy with the business of the state. The door isn't just locked. The hinges have been removed. In the quiet of the white drawing room, Prince William closes the digital folder. He doesn't look celebratory. He looks like a man who has finished a difficult, necessary surgery. The restoration. The Iron Era has successfully reclaimed the narrative. By allowing the truth to act as the ultimate weapon, William hasn't just defeated a rival. He has sterilized the throne for the next generation. The final frame. The screen glitches one last time, showing the Sussex Royal website. It flickers, then fades into a simple, elegant crest of the Prince of Wales. The history of the renegades has been moved to the archived section of the national memory. Final intelligence audit market data. As ever assets officially filed for Chapter 7 liquidation. Palling. Public trust in the Iron Era reaches a 10-year high. The Royal Rogue. Final assessment. The long game is won. The script has burned to ash. March 2026, Sandringham Estate. While the world looks toward the Regency ascendant in London, the man formerly known as Prince Harry has become a ghost in his own land. Sequestered in the gamekeeper's lodge, Henry Mountbatten lives in a world of silence, broken only by the delivery of secure documents and the cold gaze of his royal protection officers. Inside the lodge, the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and old paper. Henry is writing again, but this time there is no million-dollar contract from Penguin Random House, the unpublished memoirs. These are not stories of rebellion or freedom. They are the frantic, handwritten notes of a man trying to find where the script went wrong. He traces the timeline of the Cayman audit, looking for the moment he became the front man for a deception he didn't even understand. The biometric betrayal. He stares at the 4K footage of the Meridian Trust lobby, his wife standing before a vault that he could never open. In the Iron Era, the realization that you were never a partner, but a variable, is the ultimate penance. The video calls to California have stopped. The Freedom Flight has ended in a signal-jammed isolation. The silent phone. Meghan is now a non-extradition ghost in the Mediterranean, her assets frozen by the IRS and the King's Trust. Henry's attempts to reach her are met with a connection-failed screen, a digital metaphor for their entire marriage, the spare of Sandringham. He walks the grounds of the estate, always watched, never approached. To the local villagers, he is a specter, a reminder of a crisis that the Iron King has successfully solved through the power of total erasure. On his desk lies a photograph from 2018, a wedding day that seems like it happened in another century. The erasure of the titles. He looks at his passport, no HRH, no prince. He is a private citizen under a sovereign management protocol. The William paradox. He realizes that his brother, the Iron King, didn't destroy him out of hate, but out of a brutal clinical necessity to save the crown. By taking away Henry's voice, William has given him the only thing he ever truly claimed to want: privacy. But it is a privacy that feels like a prison. Final recluse audit. March 2026. Status: permanent residency at Sandringham under the de-identification agreement. Communication: zero external contact with Markle & Co. entities. The royal rogue. Final assessment: the prince who sought the world found only the silence of the woods. 2026. Westminster Abbey. The Iron Era has culminated in this single high-definition moment. This is not the coronation of 1953 or even 2023. This is the ascension of the 4K king. William V stands before the altar, not as a symbol of the past, but as the architect of a sterilized, transparent future. The ceremony has been stripped of the pageant of contradiction that Princess Anne warned about. Silver and steel, the heavy gold orbs and velvet capes have been replaced by a streamlined, service-first aesthetic. The ritual is shorter, sharper, and broadcast in 8K to every corner of the planet. The digital oath. In addition to the ancient religious vows, William swears a new, modern oath: the oath of transparency. He pledges a reign defined by the Iron Audit, a monarchy where every penny of the crown estate is public data, and every action is rooted in duty, not celebrity. Beside him stands Catherine, the Princess of Wales, now the Queen Consort and the Regent Ascendant, the cultural bridge. Her presence is the stabilizer. While William represents the iron structure of the state, Catherine represents the soft power that connects the crown to the youth of the Commonwealth. The new dynasty, Prince George, Charlotte, and Louis, stand in the front row, a visual promise of a fortress of loyalty. They are the first generation of the post-noir monarchy, raised without the noise of the Montecito shadows. The most striking feature of the ceremony is what is missing: the empty seats. There is no seat for Henry Mountbatten. There is no mention of the renegades. The 4K cameras, programmed with the Protocol 404 algorithm, do not even accidentally pan to the areas where the ghosts of Sandringham might have stood. Total deletion. As the crown is placed on William's head, the world doesn't look for a reaction from California. The Sussex name has been so thoroughly archived that it no longer triggers a global trend. The Iron King has achieved the impossible. He has made the drama irrelevant. Final sovereign audit. Broadcast data: 4.2 billion viewers, the most watched event in human history. Institutional status: the Iron Era is officially codified into the British Constitution. The royal rogue. Final assessment: the king didn't just take the throne, he took back the story. The noir is over. The future is clear. The Iron King has secured the realm. The renegades are a footnote. The story is settled. This concludes our investigative journey through the Royal Noir era of 2026. March 2026. London is in the grip of its coldest spring in history. But the frost doesn't come from the North Sea. It radiates from the steel-lined corridors of Buckingham Palace. The Iron Era has officially commenced, and the first casualties are those who believe they could manipulate a 1,000-year-old monarchy with a Hollywood PR machine. In the world of $350 billion streaming giants, silence is the sound of a terminal exit. On March 6, 2026, Netflix pulled the plug. Meghan Markle's lifestyle brand, As Ever, once heralded as the new gold standard of celebrity commerce, was unceremoniously dumped by the streamer. While the Sussex camp tried to spin a narrative of mutual separation and creative relief, the clinical reality is far darker. Netflix has performed a surgical amputation. Netflix is no fool. They saw the plummeting ratings for With Love, Meghan. They saw Meet Me at the Lake rotting in development hell for 3 years without a director. They didn't withdraw out of caution. They withdrew because Meghan's script is no longer profitable. As the business empire crumbles, a phantom from the past has emerged from the archives. This is the lethal glitch in the matrix that threatens to collapse the entire identity of the Duchess. Look at page 19 of the March 1997 issue of 17 magazine. A number is printed in black and white, indelible and uneditable, age 21. If the official timeline were true, Meghan would have been 15. So where did 21 come from? An editorial typo? Or evidence that her entire identity was laundered and aged down for her Hollywood infiltration? From the salsa club photos at Northwestern University to the chilling, calculated silence of her first husband, Trevor Engelson, every thread points to a single conclusion. The truth was swapped for a script. The final blow, however, didn't come from California or the press. It came from the man who now holds the iron grip on the crown, Prince William. In a mere 180 seconds, a sealed directive was issued, erasing the title of Queen from all official documentation regarding Camilla. This was not an administrative error. It was a warning shot fired across the Atlantic toward Montecito. If William can delete his own stepmother's status in 3 minutes, erasing the very existence of the Sussexes from the royal ledger is only a matter of time. Henry Mountbatten, the man formerly known as Prince Harry, now watches from a sequestered gamekeeper's lodge in Sandringham. He has no titles, no Netflix contract, and now, even his wife's past is becoming a legal minefield. Intelligence records. Audit, March 7, 2026. Netflix exit, termination of as-ever partnership. Archive, 1997, the 17 magazine discrepancy. Directive 03, William's 182nd erasure of the Queen title. As the Hollywood oxygen supply officially cuts off, the royal renegades are left with one final lifeline, their charitable foundations. But under the Exclusion Act of 2026, Prince William has authorized the Royal Financial Intelligence Unit to collaborate with Delaware-based auditors. The goal? To deconstruct the labyrinth known as Archewell. The leaked 990 tax filings for 2025-2026 reveal a devastating reality. While Meghan Markle marketed global compassion, the ledger tells a story of global extraction. The shell game. Over 90% of Archewell's expenditures were categorized as strategic consulting fees. These payments were traced back to a network of 11 shell companies registered in Delaware, all linked to the same silent partner, Marcus Anderson. The Jordan business trip. The humanitarian visit to Jordan was flagged by the IRS. Meghan's attempts to write off private jet fuel, luxury hotel suites, and high-end wardrobe costs as relief expenses have been rejected. In the eyes of the law, it wasn't a mission of mercy. It was a mission of tax evasion. While the public saw a charity, the auditors saw a laundering machine. The Iron Era investigation uncovered a sophisticated mechanism designed to funnel the last of the Netflix millions into offshore accounts before the termination protocol could seize them. The Cayman leak. Data from the Cayman Islands banking sector suggests a massive transfer of assets occurred exactly 48 hours before the Netflix as-ever contract was shredded. Back at the sequestered lodge in Sandringham, Henry Mountbatten stares at a decrypted balance sheet provided by Maya. He finally sees the truth. He was never a director. He was a front man. The real signature. Every major withdrawal from the Archewell Reserve required Meghan's sole authorization. Henry's name appears on the glossy brochures, but his signature is absent from the transfer receipts. "You were the bait, Henry," Maya says, her voice as cold as the Highland mist. "While you were chopping wood and dreaming of a return to Birmingham, the foundation was being emptied. The money isn't gone, it's just no longer yours." March 2026. In Montecito, the silence has lost its serenity. It is the heavy, suffocating stillness of a legal trap about to snap shut. Following the collapse of the Netflix deal and the leaking of the Archewell tax dossiers, The IRS has officially upgraded its audit to a federal criminal investigation. The Sussex kingdom is disintegrating at the molecular level. The asset graveyard. The $14 million Olive Grove mansion is now under a federal lien. With the Hollywood income stream severed and the Delaware shell companies flagged for money laundering, Meghan Markle is facing the ultimate noir reality: total financial insolvency. The federal crosshairs, IRS agents, bolstered by intelligence tips from London's financial corridors, are dismantling the 11-company Delaware matrix. The charges have moved beyond simple tax discrepancies into the territory of charitable fraud. The Duchess's shield has finally shattered. At 2:00 a.m. on March 8, 2026, an unlisted black SUV kills its headlights as it exits the rear gates of the Montecito estate. The destination is not LAX, but a small, non-commercial airfield in Santa Barbara. Meghan Markle, obscured by a heavy coat and oversized sunglasses, boards a chartered Global Express jet. She is not carrying movie scripts. She is clutching a titanium briefcase containing encrypted hard drives and original ledger documents for offshore accounts in the Caymans and Zurich. The objective: a non-extradition jurisdiction. The mission: to execute the final asset salvage before the global freeze order from Washington and London renders her accounts worthless. However, in the Iron Era, there are no secret flights. In a high-security command center in London, Prince William watches a single red blip move across a satellite grid. "She thinks she's escaping," William says quietly to his lead auditor. "In reality, she is the tracker. Let her fly. She is going to lead us directly to the vault where she hid the final remnants of this family's dignity." William does not order an intercept. He needs her to open the digital door to the Cayman accounts, vaults that even MI6 couldn't crack without her biometric signature. The hunt hasn't ended. It has just moved to international waters. Meridian Vault data, account 795 flagged under the Sovereign Recovery Protocol. Financial intelligence, seizure of encrypted drives containing the Marcus Anderson ledger. The Royal Rogue, the psychological collapse of the alpha fugitive when the digital oxygen runs out. 04:15 a.m. Grand Cayman. The humidity of the tropics usually invites relaxation, but inside the sterile, windowless lobby of the Meridian Private Trust, the air is freezing. Meghan Markle stands before a reinforced titanium door, her reflection captured in a dozen 4K security cameras. She has the briefcase. She has the codes. But she no longer has the initiative. To the world, she is a former duchess. To this bank, she is account holder 795, the final access. As Meghan places her hand on the biometric scanner to unlock the offshore reserves, millions siphoned from the Archewell consulting fees, the LED light doesn't turn green. It flashes a steady, rhythmic amber. The glitch. The system isn't broken. It's being held in a sovereign suspension. For the first time in 30 years, the Cayman authorities have prioritized a request from the British Crown over the privacy of a private client. The heavy glass doors behind her slide open. It isn't the police. It's two men in tailored Navy suits, the Royal Financial Recovery Unit. The confrontation. No shouting, no drama. Just the clinical presentation of a global freeze order signed by the High Court in London and mirrored by the U.S. Department of Justice. The message. "The accounts are no longer yours to manage, Rachel," one agent says, his voice devoid of emotion. "Every dollar in this vault is now classified as restitutional asset. The Iron King doesn't want the money back. He wants the ledger." Meghan realizes the Santa Barbara flight wasn't an escape. It was an escort. By traveling to the Caymans, she has provided the one thing the IRS and MI6 lacked: active intent to conceal. The leverage. In the Iron Era, mercy is a calculated variable. The agents offer a single choice: hand over the titanium briefcase and the decryption keys to the Marcus Anderson network, or face the immediate unsealing of the federal money laundering indictment waiting in Los Angeles. Meghan looks at the briefcase, then at the camera. She knows William is watching from a screen thousands of miles away. The 4K lens captures the exact moment the Hollywood illusion dies. Intelligence audit. Sandringham data. Activation of the de-identification legal framework. Financial recovery. 92% of Archewell assets successfully clawed back by the Crown. The Royal Rogue. the final psychological break of the prince who chose the wrong side of the lens. The gamekeeper's lodge at Sandringham. Henry Mountbatten, the man the world still calls Harry, sits in a room that smells of damp wood and old secrets. On the table before him lies a 4K tablet, glowing with the decrypted data from the Cayman vault. The screen scrolls through the Marcus Anderson ledger. Harry watches as years of his life are reduced to line items. The frontman protocol. He sees the transfers. Millions moved from Archewell to Delaware, then to the Caymans, authorized by a digital signature he doesn't recognize as his own, yet it bears his legal name. The Plan B revelation. The documents prove that the offshore infrastructure was built in 2019, before they ever stepped down as working royals. The escape wasn't a reaction. It was a premeditated heist. The video link chimes. The face of Prince William appears, not in a palace setting, but in a clinical white-walled operations room. The confrontation. "She didn't just leave us, Henry," William says, his voice steady and sharp as a scalpel. "She left you. The Cayman accounts were never joined. Your name was the bait for the donors, but her biometric key was the only one that worked." The evidence? William hits a key. A video from the Meridian Trust lobby plays. Meghan standing before the vault, clutching the titanium briefcase, attempting to authorize a total withdrawal of the exit fund without a single call to Sandringham. William doesn't ask for an apology. He doesn't ask for a return to the family. In the Iron Era, there are no reunions, only resolutions. The deal. The IRS indictment is ready. The FBI warrants are signed. The Duchess is now a fugitive in international waters. William states, "You have 60 minutes to sign the de-identification protocol. You renounce all claims, you testify to the financial irregularities of Archewell, and you remain here, sequestered, silent, and safe. Or you go down with the script." Harry looks at the flickering fire, then at the face of the brother he no longer recognizes. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. The Freedom Flight was just a different kind of cage, and the person holding the keys just changed. London. While the world sleeps, the digital sanitization unit at Buckingham Palace executes Protocol 404. The mandate is simple. What cannot be controlled must be removed. The Sussex experiment is officially over. On the official royal website, the transformation happens in the blink of an eye. The erasure, the dedicated pages for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, don't just move to the bottom of the list, they vanish. Links that once led to bios of charity work and global impact now return a stark white screen. 404, page not found. The rewording. In the official succession tab, the entry for Henry Mountbatten is updated. No titles, no HRH, just a footnote in a clinical font stating his permanent sequestered status at Sandringham. The name Meghan is scrubbed from the family tree as if it were a clerical error from a previous century. High above the Alboran Sea, the Global Express jet finally touches down on a private, sun-scorched strip in the Mediterranean. Meghan Markle steps out into the heat, still clutching the titanium briefcase. The isolation, the private island she sought as a sanctuary, has become a gilded cage. Every satellite in the UK-US Five Eyes network is locked onto her coordinates. The dead signal. She opens her encrypted phone to check the Cayman accounts. The screen is a frozen block of red. The Marcus Anderson ledger she carried as leverage is now useless. The keys were changed the moment Harry signed the papers at Sandringham. She is a duchess of nothing, a fugitive with a suitcase full of digital ghosts. Back in the Iron King's study, Prince William watches the final report flash across his desk. The financial recovery is complete. The brand is dismantled. The narrative is sterilized. The final decree. "Let the press speculate," William tells his private secretary. "We will never mention their names again. They are not enemies. They are non-entities. In the history of the House of Windsor, Chapter 40 through 46 will be left blank." The 4K cameras that once followed the Sussexes across the globe are now turned off. The lights in Montecito are dark. The Freedom Flight has landed in a void. End of ARC intelligence report. Web analytics. Total removal of Sussex royal metadata from all government servers. Asset recovery. Final offshore reserves transferred to the King's Trust for veteran housing. For more than 70 years, She was the most recognizable woman on earth, a small figure in bright colors, a calm smile, a quiet wave of the hand. To the world, she appeared almost timeless, almost unchanging. She was Queen Elizabeth II, a monarch who ruled longer than any other in British history. But behind the carefully controlled image of stability and duty, there existed a much more complicated story. A story filled with moments of uncertainty, sacrifice, quiet rebellion, and family tension. Moments the public rarely saw. Moments that reveal the real woman behind the crown. Tonight, we explore some of the most extraordinary chapters in the life of Elizabeth II. How a 25-year-old princess learned she had suddenly become queen. Why many once believed she might be the last monarch of the House of Windsor. The controversial marriage that shocked Britain. The secret night when two royal princesses slipped out of Buckingham Palace and vanished into the crowds of London. And the unexpected companion who joined the royal honeymoon. To understand the Queen, we must go back to the beginning, to a moment when her life changed forever. February 1952. Princess Elizabeth was far from home. She and her husband, Prince Philip, were traveling through the Commonwealth. Their journey had taken them to Kenya, in East Africa. It was meant to be an exciting tour, a glimpse into the lands connected to the British crown. Elizabeth was only 25 years old, young, energetic, still adjusting to married life. Few could imagine that within hours she would inherit one of the most powerful, symbolic roles in the world. On the afternoon of February 6th, Elizabeth visited a famous location called Treetops Lodge. The lodge sat high above the forest floor, built among the branches of massive trees. From there, visitors could observe wild animals gathering at a nearby watering hole. That evening, Elizabeth climbed into the treetop lodge. Below her, elephants, rhinoceroses, and other wildlife moved quietly through the African landscape. It was peaceful, almost surreal. But while she was watching the animals below, thousands of miles away in London, her father, King George VI, had died in his sleep. The king had suffered years of declining health. But the news still came as a shock. Within moments of his death, the machinery of monarchy began moving. Officials prepared announcements. Government leaders were notified. The line of succession shifted instantly. Princess Elizabeth had become queen. But there was one problem. She didn't know. Communication in 1952 was nothing like today. There were no instant messages, no smartphones, no 24-hour news cycle. Hours passed before the message finally reached Kenya. Prince Philip was informed first. He knew what this meant. His young wife, the woman who had been watching elephants only hours earlier, now carried the responsibility of an ancient monarchy. Philip reportedly took Elizabeth aside into the garden, away from everyone else. There, quietly, he told her the truth. Her father was gone, and she was now Queen Elizabeth II. Witnesses later described her reaction as calm, controlled, stoic. Those who would later study her reign would come to recognize that quality as one of her defining traits. She rarely allowed emotion to show publicly, but the moment must have been overwhelming. Only days earlier, she had waved goodbye to her father at the airport. Now she would return home, as queen. Within hours, preparations began for the long journey back to Britain. Before leaving the lodge, Elizabeth made a request. Photographers were present. She asked them not to take her photograph as she departed. Remarkably, they agreed. No images captured the moment when the princess walked away from Treetops Lodge. A princess when she arrived, a queen when she left. Today, the British royal family is known as the House of Windsor, but there was a time when many believed Elizabeth would be the last monarch to carry that name. The reason was Prince Philip. Philip's background was anything but simple. He had been born into the Greek royal family. He carried titles from both Greece and Denmark. But by the time he fell in love with Princess Elizabeth, those titles had become politically complicated. Before their marriage, Philip made enormous sacrifices. He gave up his Greek and Danish royal titles. He became a naturalized British citizen. And he adopted the surname Mountbatten from his mother's side of the family. In most marriages, the tradition is simple. A wife takes her husband's surname, which meant that once Elizabeth became queen, many expected the royal dynasty to change. The House of Windsor might become the House of Mountbatten. For Philip, this would have been a meaningful recognition. After all, he had already surrendered much of his identity to marry Elizabeth. But powerful figures inside the British establishment were determined to prevent that change. Two people in particular held enormous influence: Elizabeth's grandmother, Queen Mary, and Britain's Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. Both believed the royal house must remain Windsor. The name carried history, stability, continuity. Changing it could create confusion, or worse, controversy. The decision was made. The monarchy would remain the House of Windsor. Philip reportedly took the news badly. In private, he joked bitterly about the situation. At one point, he reportedly described himself as nothing but a bloody amoeba. He had given up his homeland, his titles, even parts of his identity. Yet, he could not even give his own name to his children. It was an early sign of a reality that would shape his life. For decades, Prince Philip would walk 2 steps behind the woman he loved, supporting the monarchy, even when it meant standing in her shadow. Long before she became queen, Elizabeth had already begun forming the values that would define her reign: duty, service, responsibility. During World War II, Britain faced one of the darkest periods in its history. German bombs fell on London. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Millions lived in fear. Even the royal family was not completely safe. But Elizabeth and her younger sister Margaret remained inside the relative protection of Windsor Castle. Still, Elizabeth refused to simply watch events from a distance. She wanted to contribute. Again and again, she asked government officials for permission to join the war effort. At first, the answer was always the same: no, the risks were too great. But Elizabeth persisted. Finally, she received approval to join the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army. There, she trained as both a driver and a mechanic. Imagine the scene: a future queen, covered in oil, learning how to repair engines, working under the hood of military vehicles. She learned to dismantle engines, fix mechanical problems, drive large military trucks. For perhaps the first time in her life, Elizabeth experienced something resembling normality. She worked alongside ordinary citizens, shared their responsibilities, shared their struggles. Many historians believe these experiences deeply shaped her worldview. She understood service not as a symbol, but as work. May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. After nearly 6 years of war, Germany had surrendered. The streets of London erupted in celebration. Crowds filled every corner of the city. People danced, sang, embraced strangers. It was one of the most joyous nights Britain had ever seen. At Buckingham Palace, the royal family appeared on the balcony. King George VI, Queen Elizabeth, Princess Margaret. They waved to the cheering crowds below. But Elizabeth and Margaret had a different idea. They wanted to join the celebration, not as princesses, as ordinary young women. They begged their parents for permission. Surprisingly, the king and queen agreed, but only under strict conditions. The princesses would be accompanied by a group of trusted aides and officers, about 16 people in total. That night, the group slipped quietly into the streets of London. For Elizabeth and Margaret, it was an extraordinary experience. For once, they were not surrounded by palace walls, not protected by royal protocol. They walked among the crowds. People linked arms in long lines through the streets. The princesses joined them, laughing, celebrating, blending into the crowd. No one realized that 2 members of the royal family were standing right beside them. At one point, the group even entered the famous Ritz Hotel. Inside, people were dancing wildly in celebration. For the princesses, it must have felt like stepping into another world. Later, Elizabeth returned to Buckingham Palace, but she remembered something that struck her deeply. For the first time in her life, she had stood in the crowd looking up at the balcony, the place where the royal family always stood. It was a perspective she would rarely experience again. Years later, Elizabeth described that night as one of the most memorable of my life. When Elizabeth announced her engagement to Prince Philip in 1947, the reaction was far from universally positive. Many in Britain were suspicious of Philip. His family had strong connections to Germany. Some of his sisters had married German aristocrats linked to the Nazi regime. In the tense atmosphere following World War II, this made many people uneasy. Philip also lacked wealth. He was considered rough around the edges, outspoken, unconventional. Some questioned whether he was suitable for a future queen. Even Elizabeth's parents reportedly had concerns. But Elizabeth was determined. She had fallen deeply in love, and she refused to abandon the relationship. Their wedding in November 1947 became one of the most celebrated events of the post-war era. For a country still recovering from conflict, the royal wedding offered hope, joy, and a sense of renewal. Few could imagine that this marriage would endure for more than 70 years, becoming one of the longest royal partnerships in history. After the wedding, Elizabeth and Philip began their honeymoon. They traveled first to Broadlands, the Mountbatten family home in Hampshire. Later, they continued north to Scotland. But their honeymoon had an unexpected companion, Elizabeth's beloved corgi, named Susan. Elizabeth had received Susan as a gift on her 18th birthday. The two were inseparable. So when it came time for the honeymoon, Susan came along. It was an early example of Elizabeth's lifelong love for corgis. Over the decades, she would own more than 30. For Philip, it was perhaps a humorous introduction to a reality that would persist throughout their marriage. The Queen adored her dogs, and sometimes they came first. When Elizabeth became queen in 1952, Britain was still recovering from war. The British Empire was beginning to dissolve. New nations were emerging. The world was changing rapidly. Over the next 70 years, Elizabeth would witness transformations few monarchs had ever experienced. She saw the rise of television, the internet, globalization. She worked with more than a dozen British prime ministers, from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss. She met presidents, kings, and leaders from across the world. Through it all, she maintained the same calm public image, never revealing political opinions, never stepping beyond the boundaries of constitutional monarchy. Her power was not political, it was symbolic, a symbol of continuity, of stability, of national identity, and perhaps that was her greatest achievement. Queen Elizabeth II lived through extraordinary times, wars, political upheavals, family scandals, yet she remained a constant presence in the lives of millions. But behind the crown, behind the ceremonies, there was always the same woman, the young princess who once repaired army trucks, the sister who slipped into the streets of London to celebrate victory, the dog lover who brought her corgi on honeymoon, and the young woman standing quietly in a Kenyan garden, learning that her life would never be the same again. That moment transformed her forever. From Elizabeth Windsor into one of the most enduring monarchs in history. And perhaps that is why, after 70 years on the throne, the world still finds itself asking the same question. Who was the real woman behind the crown? Prince Andrew and the crisis inside the palace. For most of Queen Elizabeth II's reign, the British monarchy survived countless storms, political turmoil, family drama, media scrutiny. Yet few controversies shook the royal institution quite like the scandal surrounding Prince Andrew, Duke of York. For decades, Andrew had been known as the Queen's favorite son, confident, charismatic, often described as bold and fearless. But by the late 2010s, his reputation and the reputation of the monarchy itself would face one of the most damaging crises in modern royal history. And at the center of the storm was a man whose name had already become infamous around the world, Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy American financier. For years, he moved comfortably among powerful elites, politicians, billionaires, celebrities. He hosted lavish parties and cultivated friendships with influential figures across the globe. But behind the glamorous facade, darker allegations had long circulated. In 2008, Epstein was convicted in the United States of charges related to procuring a minor for prostitution. Even then, many critics believed the punishment he received was unusually lenient. Yet after serving a short sentence, Epstein returned to a lifestyle of extraordinary wealth, and his connections remained extensive. Among those connections was Prince Andrew. The two men had reportedly known each other for years. They were photographed together on several occasions, in social settings, at Epstein's residences, and sometimes in the company of Epstein's associates. At the time, few people questioned the relationship, but everything would change a decade later. In 2019, the Epstein scandal exploded back into international headlines. new investigations, new testimonies, new allegations. Among the most widely reported accusations came from Virginia Giuffre, a woman who said she had been trafficked by Epstein when she was a teenager. Giuffre alleged that she had been forced to have sexual encounters with several powerful men. One of the men she named was Prince Andrew. The allegation was explosive. Giuffre claimed she had been 17 years old at the time of the alleged encounters. Andrew has consistently denied these accusations. But the story spread rapidly through global media. Photographs circulated showing Andrew standing beside Giuffre, with Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell nearby. The image became one of the most widely discussed royal photographs in years. Suddenly, the scandal surrounding Epstein was no longer just an American legal drama. It had reached the heart of the British royal family. Facing mounting public pressure, Prince Andrew made a dramatic decision. He would give an interview, not a short statement, not a carefully controlled press release, a full televised interview with the BBC. The program aired in November 2019. What followed would become one of the most infamous interviews in modern royal history. Throughout the conversation, Andrew attempted to explain his past association with Epstein. He acknowledged their friendship, but insisted he had seen no signs of Epstein's criminal behavior. The prince also attempted to explain the now famous photograph with Giuffre. His explanation raised more questions than answers. At one point, Andrew made an unusual claim. He suggested that he could not have been involved in the alleged encounter because he had a medical condition that prevented him from sweating. The comment quickly became the subject of intense media scrutiny and widespread ridicule. But perhaps the most damaging moment came when Andrew appeared to show sympathy for Epstein himself. Rather than focusing primarily on the victims, the prince spoke at length about the difficulties Epstein had faced. For many viewers, the tone seemed deeply out of touch. The interview was intended to repair Andrew's reputation. Instead, it intensified the crisis. Within hours, criticism poured in from across Britain and around the world. Inside Buckingham Palace, the situation had become untenable. Public confidence in Prince Andrew had collapsed. Sponsors began withdrawing from organizations associated with him. Charities distanced themselves from the prince. Universities removed his honorary roles. Pressure mounted on the royal household to act. Within days of the interview, Prince Andrew released a statement. He announced that he would step back from public duties. It was a stunning development. For the first time in his life, the Queen's second son would no longer represent the monarchy in official engagements. But the crisis was far from over. Legal proceedings in the United States were continuing, and the allegations against Andrew remained unresolved. In 2021, Virginia Giuffre filed a civil lawsuit against Prince Andrew in a New York court. The lawsuit accused the prince of sexual assault. Andrew's legal team strongly denied the allegations. They attempted to have the case dismissed, but the legal battle drew global attention. For the monarchy, the situation was deeply uncomfortable. The possibility of a senior royal facing a public trial in the United States would have been unprecedented. As the case progressed, pressure on the royal family intensified. In early 2022, Buckingham Palace made another dramatic announcement. Prince Andrew would lose his military titles and royal patronages. He would no longer use the style, His Royal Highness, in official settings. The message was clear. Andrew would defend himself in the lawsuit as a private citizen, not as a working royal. In February 2022, the case took another unexpected turn. Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre reached an out-of-court settlement. The terms of the agreement were not fully disclosed, but reports suggested that a significant financial payment was made. Importantly, the settlement included no admission of guilt from Andrew. The prince continued to deny the allegations. Nevertheless, the damage to his public reputation was immense. For many observers, the scandal had already reshaped perceptions of the royal family. Behind the scenes, Queen Elizabeth faced an intensely personal dilemma. Andrew was not just a prince. He was her son. And by many accounts, he had long been one of her closest children. Yet she was also the monarch, the guardian of an institution that depended heavily on public trust. Balancing those two roles, mother and queen, may have been one of the most difficult challenges of her reign. Publicly, the queen rarely spoke about the scandal. Her approach remained consistent with her lifelong style: silence, restraint, distance, but the decisions taken by Buckingham Palace suggested that the monarchy was determined to protect its long-term stability, even if that meant distancing itself from one of the Queen's own sons. The Andrew scandal arrived during a period when the royal family was already facing significant challenges. Prince Harry and Meghan had stepped back from royal duties. Public debate about the relevance of monarchy was growing. Younger generations were increasingly questioning traditional institutions. In that context, the Andrew controversy became more than just a personal scandal. It became a test of whether the monarchy could adapt and survive in a modern media environment. Critics argued that the institution had protected Andrew for too long. Supporters insisted that he deserved the same legal protections as any citizen. Either way, the situation demonstrated something crucial about modern royalty. In the age of global media, even the most ancient institutions are no longer shielded from scrutiny. Today, Prince Andrew remains largely absent from public royal life. He no longer performs official duties. His appearances are rare, and the controversy continues to shape public discussions about the monarchy. For Queen Elizabeth II, the scandal represented one of the most painful chapters of her reign, a reminder that even the most carefully managed royal image can be shaken by events beyond the palace walls. Yet the monarchy itself endured, just as it had through wars, political upheaval, and generations of change. Whether history will view the Andrew scandal as a temporary crisis or as a deeper turning point for the royal family remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, it forced the world to confront a difficult truth. Even within the most powerful royal dynasty, human vulnerability still exists. For generations, the British royal family had followed an unspoken rule: never complain, never explain. It was a principle designed to protect the monarchy from controversy. When scandals erupted, the palace remained silent. When criticism appeared in newspapers, the royal family endured it quietly. For decades, that strategy worked. But in 2016, a woman entered the royal story who would test that tradition like never before. Her name was Meghan Markle, and within just a few years, her relationship with the royal family would trigger one of the most dramatic conflicts the monarchy had faced in modern times, a conflict that would divide the public, divide the press, and in some ways, divide the royal family itself. The story began in the summer of 2016. Prince Harry, the younger son of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, was introduced to Meghan Markle through a mutual friend. At the time, Meghan was an American actress best known for her role in the television series Suits. She was independent, outspoken, and unlike most women who had entered the royal family before, she had already built a career and identity of her own. Their first meeting reportedly took place in London. According to Harry, the connection was immediate. Within weeks, their relationship became serious. But Harry knew something important. Dating someone as a member of the royal family was never simple. Every relationship faced intense scrutiny, and the British tabloids were particularly aggressive. Harry had already experienced that reality before. His past relationships had struggled under relentless media attention, yet this time felt different. Harry later described Meghan as someone who understood him, someone who shared his frustrations with the media, someone who seemed ready to face the challenges of royal life. But as the relationship became public, those challenges arrived quickly. In November 2016, news of the relationship leaked to the press. Almost immediately, Meghan became the subject of intense media coverage. Some stories were enthusiastic, but others were sharply critical. Tabloids began investigating every aspect of her life, her family, her past relationships, her career, and even her social media posts. Harry responded in an unprecedented way. Through an official palace statement, he condemned the media treatment of Meghan. The statement described harassment, racism, and intrusive reporting. It was one of the most direct confrontations between a royal and the British press in decades. But the statement did not slow the coverage. If anything, it intensified it. The relationship had become global news, and the world was watching. In November 2017, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced their engagement. The news created excitement around the world. Many observers believed Meghan represented a new chapter for the monarchy. She was American, divorced, biracial, and openly outspoken about social issues. To some, her arrival signaled a modernization of the royal family, a sign that the monarchy was adapting to a new era, Their wedding in May 2018 was watched by millions across the globe. The ceremony blended traditional royal elements with modern touches. A gospel choir performed. An American bishop delivered a passionate sermon. Hollywood celebrities sat alongside European royalty. For a moment, the mood was overwhelmingly positive. Harry and Meghan appeared deeply in love. The public seemed ready to welcome a new royal couple. But behind palace walls, tensions were already beginning to surface. Soon after the wedding, reports began circulating about difficulties within the royal household. According to several royal correspondents, Meghan struggled to adjust to the rigid traditions of royal life. The monarchy operated according to centuries of protocol. Schedules, hierarchy, rules governing everything from clothing to public statements. For someone who had lived an independent life in America, the transition was not easy. At the same time, palace staff reportedly found Meghan demanding. Some accounts described tensions between Meghan and members of the royal household. One rumor that gained significant attention involved Catherine, Princess of Wales, the wife of Prince William. Reports claimed a disagreement between Meghan and Catherine occurred before the wedding. The dispute reportedly involved bridesmaid dresses for young Princess Charlotte. Initially, the press claimed Meghan had made Catherine cry. Years later, Meghan would say the opposite was true. The conflicting accounts only deepened public fascination, and the tension between the two royal couples became a growing subject of speculation. Perhaps the most dramatic shift occurred between Prince William and Prince Harry. For most of their lives, the two brothers had appeared inseparable. After the death of their mother, Princess Diana, they relied heavily on each other. They worked together on charitable initiatives. They supported each other during royal engagements. But after Harry's marriage, the relationship began to change. William reportedly worried that the romance between Harry and Meghan was moving too quickly. According to Harry, William encouraged him to slow down, to take more time before making major commitments. Harry later said he interpreted the advice as criticism of Meghan. Over time, disagreements grew. The once close partnership between the brothers began to fracture. Eventually, Harry and Meghan moved out of Kensington Palace. They established their own household at Frogmore Cottage. The split symbolized something deeper. The royal family, once united in public image, now appeared divided. In January 2020, the situation reached a dramatic turning point. Prince Harry and Meghan released an unexpected statement. Without advance consultation with senior royal officials, they announced plans to step back as senior working members of the royal family. The announcement stunned the palace. It stunned the media. And it stunned the public. The couple explained that they wanted to pursue financial independence. They also wanted to divide their time between Britain and North America. Behind the scenes, emergency discussions began among senior royals. Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Charles, Prince William, Harry. A summit was arranged at the Queen's estate in Sandringham. There, the future of Harry and Meghan's royal roles would be decided. The meeting became known as the Sandringham Summit. Few details from the conversation were made public, but the outcome was clear. Harry and Meghan would no longer be working members of the royal family. They would lose official royal funding. They would no longer use the title His and Her Royal Highness in official capacities. In return, they would be free to pursue independent careers. The agreement marked one of the most dramatic changes to the structure of the royal family in decades. Within months, Harry and Meghan relocated to California. They began building a new life far from Buckingham Palace. But the story was far from over. In fact, the most explosive chapter was still ahead. In March 2021, Harry and Meghan sat down for an interview with American television host Oprah Winfrey. The broadcast quickly became one of the most watched royal interviews in history. During the conversation, the couple made several startling claims. They described feeling unsupported by the royal institution. They spoke about Meghan's struggles with mental health. They alleged that concerns had been raised within the royal family about the skin color of their unborn son, Archie. The revelation sent shockwaves through Britain. Supporters of Harry and Meghan praised their willingness to speak openly. Critics accused the couple of damaging the reputation of the monarchy. Buckingham Palace responded with a brief statement. The palace acknowledged that the issues raised were concerning, but added that recollections may vary. The phrase became one of the most widely quoted lines in royal communications. In the years that followed, tensions between Harry and the rest of the royal family remained visible. Harry released a memoir titled Spare. In the book, he described personal conflicts with members of the royal household. He spoke openly about arguments with Prince William. He described feeling marginalized within the institution. For the royal family, the situation created an unusual challenge. Royal tradition emphasized unity, but the public disagreement between Harry and the palace was unfolding on a global stage, and social media amplified every detail. Supporters and critics debated the situation endlessly. Was Harry exposing necessary truths about an outdated institution? Or was he undermining the family he once served? The answer depended largely on perspective. For Queen Elizabeth II, the conflict represented one of the most emotionally difficult chapters of her reign. She had always placed immense value on family unity. Yet the dispute between Harry and the rest of the royal household played out publicly during the final years of her life. Despite the tension, the Queen maintained her characteristic approach. She rarely spoke publicly about family disagreements. Instead, she focused on the continuity of the institution. When Elizabeth died in 2022, Harry returned to Britain for the funeral. For a brief moment, the brothers stood together again, walking behind their grandmother's coffin, just as they had once walked together behind their mother's. But whether the wounds between them had truly healed remained uncertain. The conflict between Meghan Markle and the royal family revealed something profound about the modern monarchy. The institution had survived wars, political upheavals, and countless scandals. But the age of social media and global celebrity had created new pressures. Harry and Meghan represented a new model of royal life: independent, media-savvy, financially autonomous. The royal family, meanwhile, continued to rely on traditions centuries old. Between those two visions lay a deep and complicated divide. Whether history will ultimately view the conflict as a crisis or as a turning point in the evolution of the monarchy remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the story of Meghan Markle and the royal family has become one of the most dramatic chapters in modern royal history, and its consequences may continue to shape the future of the British monarchy for years to come. Is the monarchy in danger? For more than 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II had been the constant center of British public life. Prime ministers came and went, political parties rose and fell, empires dissolved, nations were born. But through every decade of change, one figure remained: the Queen. Her presence had become so familiar, so steady, that many people found it difficult to imagine Britain without her. For millions, she was not just a monarch. She was a symbol of continuity, a living bridge between the past and the present, and that is why the moment she died in September 2022 felt like more than the passing of a person. It felt like the end of an era. Suddenly, a question that had long been quietly whispered began to echo loudly across Britain and the world. What happens now? And more importantly, can the monarchy survive without Elizabeth? On September 8, 2022, Buckingham Palace released a short statement. The words were simple, but their impact was enormous. The Queen had died peacefully at Balmoral Castle. She was 96 years old. Almost instantly, the carefully choreographed plans for the transition of power began. Plans that had been quietly prepared for decades. The moment the Queen died, her eldest son became king, King Charles III. For much of his life, Charles had been known as the longest-serving heir in British history. He had waited more than 70 years to inherit the throne. Now, at the age of 73, his reign had begun. Yet even before the funeral ceremonies concluded, commentators across the world were asking a difficult question. Would Charles be able to command the same respect as his mother? Because Queen Elizabeth had not only ruled for a long time, she had ruled during a period when public trust in institutions was already fragile. And somehow, she had managed to preserve the monarchy's popularity. But Charles faced a very different world. For decades, public perception of Prince Charles had been complicated. To some, he was thoughtful and intellectually curious. He had long championed environmental causes. He spoke about climate change decades before it became a mainstream political issue. He supported architecture, farming, and interfaith dialogue, but others saw him differently. To them, Charles remained linked to one of the most dramatic royal scandals of the 20th century. his marriage to Princess Diana, and the painful divorce that followed. For many members of the public, Diana had become an icon. Her death in 1997 had triggered an outpouring of grief unlike anything Britain had experienced in modern times. And although Charles later married Camilla, public opinion toward the couple remained complicated for years. Queen Elizabeth's long reign had gradually softened those tensions. But now Charles was king, and the spotlight that had once focused on Elizabeth was now fixed directly on him. Every decision he made would be scrutinized, every gesture interpreted. The challenge before him was enormous. He needed to prove that the monarchy could continue to evolve in the 21st century. One of Charles's long-standing ideas was something he called a slimmed-down monarchy. For years, he had believed that the royal family needed to reduce the number of working royals. The institution, he argued, should become smaller, more efficient, more focused. Under this vision, only a limited group of senior royals would perform official duties: the king, the queen, the prince and princess of Wales, and a few other close family members. In theory, the idea made sense. A smaller monarchy might appear more modern, less expensive, less distant from the public. But in practice, the situation was complicated, because several members of the royal family had already stepped away from royal duties. Prince Andrew had been removed from public life following his scandal. Prince Harry and Meghan had relocated to the United States. That left a much smaller pool of royals to perform hundreds of annual engagements. Critics wondered whether the institution might become overstretched, and whether the royal family could maintain its traditional presence across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. During Queen Elizabeth's reign, the monarchy maintained strong ties with the Commonwealth, a network of more than 50 nations. Many of these countries had once been part of the British Empire. Over time, they evolved into independent states, but some retained the British monarch as their official head of state. Elizabeth had invested enormous energy into nurturing those relationships. She traveled extensively, visited dozens of nations, met generations of leaders, and gradually transformed the Commonwealth into a voluntary association rather than a colonial structure. But the future of those relationships is now uncertain. In recent years, several Commonwealth countries have begun debating whether to remove the British monarch as head of state. Barbados made that decision in 2021. Other nations, including Jamaica and Australia, have discussed similar possibilities. For many younger citizens in these countries, the monarchy represents a complicated colonial history. And while Elizabeth commanded widespread personal respect, the same automatic loyalty may not extend to future monarchs. The question facing King Charles is delicate. Can the Commonwealth continue to exist as a meaningful global partnership without the personal bond that Elizabeth cultivated for decades? Another challenge confronting the modern monarchy is something earlier generations of royals never faced: social media. In the 20th century, public perception of the royal family was shaped primarily by newspapers and television. Information flowed in relatively controlled channels. Today, the situation is radically different. Every speech, every appearance, every rumor, every photograph can spread across the internet within minutes. Social media platforms amplify controversy. Small stories can become global debates overnight, and the royal family, with its mixture of glamour, history, and secrecy, remains one of the most fascinating subjects for online audiences. But fascination also brings criticism. Every royal decision now unfolds under constant digital scrutiny. Mistakes can become viral headlines within hours, and once an image or rumor circulates online, it is almost impossible to control. For a centuries-old institution built on tradition and careful messaging, the social media era presents both opportunities and risks. Despite these challenges, many observers believe the future of the monarchy may depend on the next generation of royals. At the center of that future are Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. William represents a different model of royal leadership, less formal, more accessible. He and Catherine have emphasized issues such as mental health, early childhood development, and environmental protection. Their public image is carefully crafted, professional, modern, family-oriented. They often appear with their 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. These images reinforce a narrative of stability and continuity. For many supporters of the monarchy, William represents the bridge between ancient tradition and modern expectations. But even this new generation cannot entirely escape the pressures surrounding the royal institution. Public expectations are changing, questions about relevance are growing, and the monarchy must constantly justify its role in a democratic society. In recent years, Republican movements in Britain have become more visible. Organizations advocating the abolition of the monarchy argue that an unelected head of state is outdated in a modern democracy. They question the cost of maintaining royal residences and ceremonies. They challenge the idea of hereditary privilege. Supporters of the monarchy counter that the institution provides stability and national identity. They argue that the royal family attracts global tourism, promotes British culture, and offers a politically neutral figurehead for the country. The debate is unlikely to disappear, but historically, the monarchy has proven remarkably adaptable, from absolute power centuries ago to constitutional symbolism today. Each generation has reshaped the institution in response to social change. Ultimately, the monarchy survives not because of political authority, but because of symbolism, ceremony, history, and the emotional connection people feel toward the crown. When millions watched Queen Elizabeth's funeral in 2022, they were not simply observing a state event, they were witnessing the closing chapter of a life that had intersected with their own. For 70 years, she had appeared in their living rooms, on television broadcasts, at national celebrations, during moments of crisis. Her death reminded many people how unusual the monarchy truly is. A human institution built on tradition stretching back more than 1,000 years. And now that institution had entered a new chapter. So the question remains, is the monarchy in danger? The answer may depend on how effectively it adapts. King Charles faces the task of maintaining continuity while introducing reform. Prince William represents the next stage of modernization, and the younger generation will ultimately determine whether the monarchy continues to hold meaning in the decades ahead. History suggests that the institution is resilient. It has survived civil wars, revolutions, world wars, scandals, and political transformations. But survival has always required change. The monarchy that exists today is not the same institution that existed a century ago or 2 centuries ago, and the monarchy that exists 50 years from now will likely look different again. Queen Elizabeth II once described the monarchy as something that must evolve with the times. Throughout her reign, she quietly guided the institution through extraordinary change. But even she understood that no monarch rules forever. The future would eventually belong to the next generation. Now that moment has arrived. King Charles III sits on the throne. Prince William prepares for the role that will one day be his. And the world watches closely. Because the story of the British monarchy is far from finished. It is simply entering a new chapter. A chapter that will determine whether one of the world's oldest institutions can survive in the modern age, or whether history will remember Queen Elizabeth II